My name is Father Elias. I was a priest, a shepherd, a man of collar and candlelight. But what I am now, I cannot name, because I died. And what I saw when the veil tore open, I was never meant to return and tell. I never thought I'd share this, not because I lacked the courage, but because it's not courage that kept me silent. It's the weight, the holiness of what I witnessed, the sacred terror of it. I met him. Not the painted Christ, not the golden crucifix that hangs above the altar. No, I stood before the Lamb whose eyes are fire, before the judge who weeps, before the shepherd whose voice still echoes through the ruins of this world. And in that moment, everything I preached, everything I thought I understood, crumbled like dust under his gaze. He called my name in the dark. He called it not with thunder, but with a stillness that split the heavens. And I knew then that I was known completely. And still, I was loved. But he did not bring me home to stay. He gave me a charge, a vow, a fire I could not refuse. He said, "Go back, speak, even if it costs you everything." And it has. This testimony is not safe. It is not sweet. It will wound you before it heals you, because the truth burns, and the truth must be told, even if it shatters what you believe, even if it tears open the veil you've wrapped around your comfort, even if it calls you to leave everything behind. I was brought back to speak, not from pride, not from madness, but from obedience, because if I did not speak, the stones in the ground would cry out in my place. So hear me, not with your ears but with your soul. This is not just a story, it is a summons, a trumpet in the night. The time is now. Return to the fire, return to the altar, return to the Lamb, because what I saw beyond the veil is already unfolding beneath your feet, and what he showed me will haunt you and heal you if you let it. He called my name in the dark, and now I call yours. Before the veil tore, before the light swallowed me, I lived like most men do who wear the robe, between shadow and sanctuary. My days were carved in ritual, morning bells, the rustle of vestments, incense rising like weary prayers, the slow rhythm of Mass, where the chalice is lifted, but the heart sometimes stays heavy. I stood at the altar, hands steady, voice measured. I performed the holy duties, read the gospel, lifted the host, whispered absolution over bowed heads. But somewhere inside, a silence had crept in, a slow, aching silence. I didn't lose my faith. No, I lost the fire that once burned behind my ribs when I first said yes, the fire that once made me tremble when I read the word, the fire that used to wake me before dawn, hungry for communion, not just with man but with God. Something was off, subtle but sure, like a leak in the soul, like oil draining from the lamp. I would sit alone in the chapel some nights, long after the candles had gone out, and I'd stare at the crucifix above the altar, asking questions with no language and hearing answers too soft to follow. Heaven was whispering, but I wasn't listening. I had become a good priest by the world's measure, punctual, composed, revered in my parish, but inwardly, I had become a man of ashes, form without flame. The confessions I heard, week after week, they began to echo, blur together. Lust, pride, envy, regret. And yet I saw my own face in their sins, as if the booth were a mirror and not a veil. Sometimes I would pause before the words, "May God grant you pardon and peace," because I wasn't sure I believed peace was even reachable anymore. Not for them, and certainly not for me. I remember one Sunday as I lifted the chalice, a thought passed through me like a ghost. Do you even know who you're raising it to anymore? I pushed it away. We all push it away, because doubt in a collar is a scandal. But truth kept whispering through the cracks. And then came the dreams. I began to see a river, wide, dark, endless, and I stood at its edge barefoot, holding nothing, while a voice on the other side whispered my name. Not shouted, whispered, and still it thundered through my bones. I would wake up shaking, heart pounding, mouth dry, unable to recall the face from the other shore, only the voice. He called my name in the dark, and I ignored it. At first, I buried myself in more services, more pastoral counseling, more distractions labeled as duty. But the whisper would not leave. I would see people's faces flicker during Mass, as if something ancient was buried beneath their eyes, as if they too had heard the voice and forgotten. as if the whole world was standing on the edge of something sacred and didn't know how close we were to falling into glory or judgment. Something was off. The air felt thinner. Time felt stretched. I remember staring at the stained glass windows and feeling as though the saints were watching, not in peace but in warning. I did not know then that the curtain was already lifting, that death had already begun stalking my breath, not as punishment, but as mercy, because sometimes he must kill what's dying inside us before he can raise us into what we were always meant to be. And so I went on, not knowing my steps were already counting down, that the veil between heaven and earth was thinning like the skin of an old wound. That so I would stand before the very voice that had called me in the dark, and I would never be the same again. Heaven was whispering, but I wasn't listening. He called my name in the dark, and still, I stayed asleep, but not for long. It happened on an ordinary morning, the kind that arrives with no thunder, no warning, only stillness. The sky was clear. The vestments were pressed. The gospel reading was marked in red ribbon. I had just begun the Eucharistic prayer. My hands lifted over the chalice, my lips forming words I had said 1,000 times. "Take this, all of you, and eat of it." And then, the world tilted. A sudden tightness gripped my chest, like an invisible hand closing around the center of me. The chalice trembled. The host slipped from my fingers and fluttered like a leaf. And in that suspended moment, I felt the great undoing. Not chaos, not fear, but a holy rupture, a breaking. My knees gave way. The marble floor rose to meet me. The world narrowed into soundless light and distant voices I could no longer answer. I heard a woman scream. I heard the shuffling of feet. But all of it came through a veil, as though I was already on the other side of glass. Then silence. And then stillness. I left everything behind. Even breath. Even name. My body. The vessel that had carried sacraments and sermons, lay crumpled beside the altar, lifeless. A husk. And I stood above it, unmoored from skin and gravity. I saw my face, pale, mouth slightly open, eyes half-lidded, but I felt no fear, only an impossible peace, a stillness deeper than sleep, deeper than memory. Time folded in on itself. I could feel it unraveling like thread in water. The ticking of clocks fell silent. The weight of years slipped off me like soaked robes. I hovered, not flying, not floating, just being, between. The light around me was not sunlight. It pulsed, it breathed, it felt alive, like it had a voice I couldn't yet understand, but one I somehow recognized. And then I felt it, a pull, not from in front of me, but from within me, like something sacred buried in my chest was being drawn home. I began to move, effortlessly, like falling upward, drawn by a gravity I could not see. The air grew soft. The sounds of earth dimmed until there was nothing but vibration, and even that began to dissolve. I passed through layers of silence, not the silence of absence, but the silence of origin, the silence that existed before sound was born. I left everything behind, even breath, even grief, even the idea of fear. And yet, this was not the end. I thought death would feel like falling apart, but instead, it felt like finally becoming whole. I did not cry, because there were no tears where I was. Only awe, only return. He called my name in the dark, and now, I was answering. I was being carried into a place where words failed, and the soul remembered what it had always known. The altar, the pews, the stained glass, all behind me now, gone. Only the light remained, and that whisper, that sacred, trembling whisper pulling me deeper in. You are not done, but you must see. This was not the end. No, this was the beginning of the end of everything I thought I understood. And so I went, without resistance, without question. I was no longer a priest. I was no longer a man. I was a soul, returning to the fire. There was no threshold, no gate or trumpet, only a slow unfolding, like the petals of a flower blooming in reverse, back to its origin. I drifted into it, a tunnel, yes, but not of stone or steel. A living path, woven from strands of pure light, each one humming with a sound I didn't hear with ears, but with essence. It was not silent. It was singing. Not a song like ours with melody and end, but a language made of light and memory. A harmony of what was, what is, and what will be, spoken all at once. Each step I took was not a step, but a surrender. I passed through this river of radiance like smoke curling upward. The further I went, the less of me there was to carry. The weight of guilt, the heaviness of years, the tightness in my chest, gone. Shed like skin I no longer needed. I was not walking. I was being welcomed. Drawn into the arms of something I had spent my whole life talking about, but had never truly touched. Peace covered me like a robe of light. And not just peace like quietness. Not the peace we speak of in passing at funerals. No, this was completion. Every fracture in me sealed. Every unspoken cry answered without words. Every fear dissolved in a love so vast, it eclipsed even the memory of pain. There were others. I could feel them. Not as shapes or faces, but as presence, souls. Each one glowing with the memory of who they were and the glory of who they had become. Some I knew. I felt the presence of my mother. Not her face, but her fragrance, her laugh, the way her prayers once wrapped around me like blankets on cold seminary nights. She did not speak. She did not need to. I knew she had waited, and I knew she was whole. Others were strangers, and yet familiar, as if we had all come from the same breath, as if every soul I passed was a verse in the same eternal song. I moved deeper. Time no longer ticked. It expanded. It melted. It bowed. It was not passing. It was present. Always. I had never truly lived until I died, because here, nothing hid. Not shame. Not wounds. Not longing. Here all things stood naked before light and were not afraid. Here there was no hunger, because we were full. Full of love. Full of Him. Full of what had always been waiting behind the veil. The colors around me pulsed like breath. Golds that bled into blues I had never seen on earth. Fields of light stretching beyond vision. Skies made of song. Winds that carried names not yet spoken. I wanted to stay. With every particle of what I was, I longed to remain in that sanctuary beyond suffering. But still, somewhere in the distance, the whisper returned. He called my name in the dark, not to rest, but to rise, not to dwell, but to remember. And even in the flood of glory, I felt it, the gentle tug of assignment, the holy ache of purpose still unfinished. This was not yet my home, not entirely, not yet. There was more to see, more to be shown, a message not yet spoken, that would tear through the silence of the world I had left behind. So I kept moving, drawn deeper still, not by curiosity, but by obedience, because He was waiting, not far from now, just beyond the next breath of light. And I was being made ready, returned to the fire, returned to the altar, returned to the truth that burns but does not consume. I had never truly lived until I died. And in death I was finally walking toward the face of love Himself. And then He came. There was no announcement, no procession, no booming voice or trembling sky, just presence, pure, holy, undeniable. He didn't walk toward me. He filled everything. The light that had been drawing me all along, it was Him. Not light that shines, but light that knows, that reveals, that remakes. And I, who had served His altar, who had spoken His name over bread and wine, suddenly realized I had never truly known the weight of Him. Not like this. Not as a person who stands inside eternity, but who carries wounds like a crown and eyes like flame. There was no distance between us. And yet I fell. I didn't choose to kneel. I collapsed into it. Because when holiness stands before you, everything false dies. Everything hidden comes into the light and does not resist. I saw His face, and in it, my own. Not the face others knew, but the face He saw. A single glance, and my entire life unfolded before us like a scroll. No pages turned, no timeline shown, just knowing. All at once, the prayers I rushed, the pride I carried in silence. The sermons preached more for admiration than transformation, and yet, He did not accuse. There was no anger in Him, no disappointment, only truth, and a love that burned deeper because it saw everything, and stayed. I wept, not with human tears, but with the kind of sorrow that comes when you realize how much you've been loved, and how little you loved in return. I buried my face in what felt like air and fire, and I whispered through sobs I didn't know could exist in the spirit, "I'm not worthy." And then, as clear as the breath in my chest used to be, He spoke, not with lips, not in words, but in truth that passed through my being like thunder wrapped in honey. You were brought here to remember. And I knew what he meant. He wasn't just speaking to the man I had become. He was speaking to the child I once was, to the boy who used to lay awake at night wondering what heaven looked like, to the seminarian who once prayed not for power but for purity, to the soul who had once burned to see the face of God. You were brought here to remember, and I did remember. I remembered why I said yes. I remembered the call, the fire, the covenant. All of it, buried beneath years of noise and duty, came flooding back like a dam undone. I wanted to stay at his feet forever, to be nothing but dust beneath his radiance. But he wasn't finished. Again the voice, not voice, came, soft but unshakable. Keep speaking. I trembled, because in that moment I knew this was not for me to keep. What I was seeing, what I was being given, it wasn't a gift, it was an assignment, a burden of glory, a weight of witness. Keep speaking. This wasn't just about me. This wasn't just about a priest who forgot how to feel the fire. This wasn't just about death, or visions, or near-miss miracles. This was about us, about you, about a church that had lost its first love, about a people asleep in pews while the heavens burn with warning. This wasn't just a testimony, it was a trumpet, and I had to sound it, even if it meant being misunderstood, mocked, rejected. Because once you've stood in the gaze of Jesus, you don't get to go back to silence. You don't get to pretend you didn't see. He called my name in the dark, and now I call yours. Return to the fire. Return to the altar. Return to the one who still carries wounds not for pity, but for power. You were brought here to remember, to awaken, to burn again. So I speak, because I must, because I vowed that if I returned, I would never be silent again. He turned, and when he did, I saw not just his face, but the world reflected in his eyes. Not the world as it appears, but the world as it truly is. And what I saw broke me. He showed me the church, not the walls and windows, not the gilded icons or the polished sermons, but the heart, the beating center of what was once flame, now flickering under the weight of tradition without presence, ornaments without oil. He showed me pulpits built higher than altars, ministers craving applause more than anointing, a body dressed in robes, but naked of wonder, naked of power. He whispered, "They preach me, but they do not know me." And I wept, because I knew it was true, because I had been one of them, a voice for the word, but not always a vessel. He showed me souls, millions of them, hungry for truth, starving in pews built to entertain. I saw their prayers, rising like smoke, only to fall back down, not because heaven ignored them, but because no one ever taught them how to burn. I saw cathedrals echoing with song, but empty of presence, altars cold, eyes hollow, hearts distracted. He said, "They have built kingdoms in my name, but forgotten my face." And then, he showed me what the church was meant to be. Oh God, what glory! I saw it, the ancient fire, the raw, holy trembling of the early saints. I saw men and women who had no microphones, no money, no media, but they had flame, they had purity, they had power. I saw apostles walking barefoot, singing in chains. I saw widows raising the dead in hidden caves, children casting out demons with nothing but a whispered prayer. No stage, no spotlight, only fire. And I heard him say, "This is what I planted, and this is what will rise again." He said, "There are still ones who carry my fire, hidden, mocked, exiled by systems that cannot contain them, but they are mine. They were chosen. They cannot be silenced." I saw them. I saw a remnant, a scattered people, from nations and tribes the world overlooks. Africa, Asia, villages no map records. I saw the poor, kneeling on dirt floors, singing the heavens open. I saw women once abused, now ablaze. I saw children with eyes like flames, prophesying truth that silenced rooms. He said, "I never left. They did, but I am calling them back." There is a great sifting. I saw a storm, not of wind, but of truth. It swept through churches, tearing down platforms built on pride, exposing idols dressed in priestly garments. It was not punishment. It was cleansing. It was mercy wrapped in fire. A return. He said, They erased my image in you. They taught you shame where I planted glory. They taught you fear where I offered intimacy. But I am restoring it." And then he turned to me, and his eyes, oh God, his eyes, held the weight of 10,000 thunders. But they did not crush me. They called me. He said, Tell them I am not absent. Tell them I am not silent. Tell them I am not tame. Tell them I still walk among the lamps. I still breathe on bones. I still call fishermen to be flame bearers. I still turn graves into gardens. I still tear veils. Tell them I want my church back. They were chosen. They cannot be silenced. They must remember. Return to the fire. Return to the altar. Return to me. And then, silence. Not absence, but the silence of reverence. The silence of a king whose word never returns empty. He called my name in the dark, and he gave me this to carry. Not as a story, but as a burden, a vow. And I have kept it, because the time is short. The fire is coming, and the bride must awaken. He showed me what comes next, not in the way of dreams but of revelation. It wasn't a vision cast upon the sky. It was a knowing poured into the marrow of my soul. It began with wind, a holy wind rising from dry ground, and I saw the dust of forgotten lands stirred into flame. Africa, oh Africa, not the Africa described in reports or pitted in prayers, but the womb of something ancient, the cradle of a coming revival. I saw children walking barefoot on cracked earth, yet heaven walked with them. Their mouths opened, and rivers flowed from their tongues. Prophecies untainted by platform or pride. They did not speak for applause. They spoke because they were aflame. The old and the young stood side by side. No competition, only covenant. Grandmothers who could not read, laying hands on the sick, and the sick rising. Street boys once ignored, now clothed in fire. Eyes lifted, voices thundering in prayer, shaking the gates of hell. They will lead the world into spiritual rebirth. I saw the reversal. The last became first. The ones discarded by history, now crowned in purpose. I saw oil being poured out on heads unrecognized by men, but adored by heaven. Fishermen, market women, prisoners, shepherds. No names, only flames. They were the ones we never thought would carry the torch. But heaven knew them by name, and had waited generations to raise them. A trumpet is sounding. I saw Europe, cold, quiet, weary. Churches turned into cafes. Altars turned into stages. But in the hidden places, cellars, forests, bedrooms, remnants gathered in silence. They were few, but pure, unshaken, fasting, crying out for rain. And rain came, not of water, but of presence. I saw Asia trembling beneath governmental threats. And yet, underground, the church pulsed like a heartbeat in the dark. Every attempt to silence them only made them louder in the spirit. In South America, I saw women weeping over maps, and the tears became fire. Their intercession broke curses over entire regions. In North America, I saw a cleansing, a tearing down of altars built to men. Ministries crumbled like sandcastles. But those who had wept in the shadows, they rose. It was not revival as we know it. It was not lights and music and crowds. It was deeper, quieter, truer. It was groaning. It was obedience. It was worship without a stage. It was truth without filter. It was fire falling on those the world had overlooked. I saw a new earth being birthed, not through revolution, but through repentance, through sackcloth, through hidden rooms soaked in prayer, through mothers praying through the night, through children refusing to forget the sound of the Spirit. You were born for this hour. There is no one else coming. It is us. It is now. He called my name in the dark, and in that name he placed a trumpet, a warning, a cry. Return to the fire. Return to the oil. Return to the word unedited. You were born for this hour. And if you're hearing this, it means heaven is knocking on the door of your calling. It means the mantle is already falling, not on the ones you expect, but on the ones who have nothing left to prove, only everything left to surrender. The trumpet is sounding. Let the bride awaken. I woke in a room not made of light, but of wires, antiseptic, and shadows. The ceiling was white. The light was harsh. Machines hummed around me like lifeless sentinels, monitoring a body that no longer felt like mine. My chest ached, not from pain, but from weight. The weight of return. The weight of memory. The weight of knowing what I could never again unknow. They said I had flatlined. They said it was a miracle. They called it clinical death. But they did not know what I had seen. I lay there for days, eyes open, soul burning, silent not from weakness, but from reverence. How do you speak of fire to those who only know embers? How do you describe color to eyes that have only seen gray? Nothing felt the same. Not the air, not the voices, not the face in the mirror. Even the rhythms of life, the ticking clock, the beeping monitors, sounded distant, hollow, irrelevant. I was alive, but I no longer belonged. He called my name in the dark, and now the world around me felt dim by comparison. When I was strong enough to speak, I tried. I tried to share what I had seen, first with nurses, then with colleagues, then with my superiors. At first they listened, polite nods, soft smiles, the kind you offer someone who's survived a trauma they can't explain. Then came the questions, then the caution. They said I was disoriented, that I should rest, that the brain creates illusions under extreme stress. But this was no illusion. This was encounter. I spoke of fire. They heard fever. I spoke of a voice that shattered the dark. They heard hallucination. And slowly, doors began to close. Invitations stopped arriving. Calls went unanswered. I was gently advised to step back from active ministry, to process what had happened, to be careful what I shared. They didn't want this truth to spread. They said it was too heavy, too divisive, too unprovable. But the truth does not ask for permission. It pierces, it convicts, it demands a response. I felt the resistance take shape, not just in people, but in the air. Darkness moved differently now. Shadows pressed in at strange hours. My devices malfunctioned. My sleep fractured. I'd wake at 3 a.m. to whispers I couldn't trace. Not all of it was natural. There were nights I felt watched. Nights when I'd kneel in prayer and feel a pressure, like something ancient, wounded, angry, clawing at the edges of my peace. Obedience will cost you everything. I was losing friends, position, reputation, comfort. But I had seen too much to stay silent, too much to pretend. I walked through rooms I used to find sacred, and felt nothing but absence. I heard sermons that once inspired, and heard only echoes. I read scriptures I had memorized, and wept, because now I could feel them again. The veil had been lifted, and I couldn't live like it hadn't. Still, the truth must be told, even if it means standing alone, even if it means losing everything. He called my name in the dark, and I answered, not with grandeur, not with certainty, but with trembling lips and burning bones. Because to carry what I carry is not glory, it is weight. It is fire shut up in my bones, and fire cannot be contained forever. So I speak, even when the cost rises, even when silence would be easier, because I made a vow in the place where time ends, to speak what I saw, no matter the consequence. They don't want this truth to spread, but spread it will. Not because of me, but because heaven is stirring, because the bride is waking, because the fire is coming, and all that's been hidden will be revealed. All that's been buried will rise. All that's been silenced will shout. Return to the fire. Return to the flame that cannot lie. Return to the voice that still calls your name in the dark. Because if he called me, he's calling you. There is a war for your soul. Not loud, not obvious, not raging in the streets, but quiet, subtle, almost kind. It smiles. It scrolls. It seduces. It tells you, you're fine. It says, there's no need to hurry. But behind the whisper is a blade. He showed me the truth. A deception rising, clothed in comfort. A darkness that will not come with horns or chains, but with convenience, distraction, and digital lullabies. It will numb you before it kills you. And most will not even notice they're dying. He showed me a world drunk on lies. Hearts flooded with noise. Souls asleep beneath glowing screens. Churches filled with people who have never met the one they sing about. There is a shaking coming. It has already begun. And when it reaches full force, only those anchored in truth will stand. Not in opinions. Not in denominations. Not in preachers or podcasts or pride. But in Christ alone. The fire-eyed man. The Lamb who was slain. The voice that still calls through the dark. You were brought here to remember. To remember the narrow road. To remember the trembling that used to fall on hearts when his name was spoken in truth. To remember when worship was not a performance but a weeping. Return to the fire. Return to the place of encounter. Return to the God who still bleeds for the ones who've forgotten him. You were not made for this world's rhythm. You were not made to blend in. You were not made to die a quiet death in a comfortable cage. You were born to burn. This message is not for your entertainment. It is for your awakening. It is for your rescue. It is for your return. Because the time is now. The veil is thinning. The King is near. And you must choose. Not with words, but with your life. With what you do when no one is watching. With the altars you rebuild in the quiet corners of your days. With the idols you tear down when no one applauds. You were brought here to remember. And now that you've heard, you cannot pretend you haven't. Will you go back to sleep? Or will you rise? Will you stay numb? Or will you burn? He called my name in the dark. And now he's calling yours. Not with fear, but with love. Not with shame, but with truth. There is a war for your soul. But there is also a door. Still open. Still stained with blood. Still whispering, come. This is your moment. This is your hour. Return to the fire. While there is still time. Return to the fire before the door shuts. You were brought here to remember. And now, you must decide. There is no going back. Not for me. And perhaps not for you. Once the veil is lifted. Once the eternal wind brushes against your soul. Once the truth, raw and holy, has passed through your spirit like fire through linen. You cannot return to sleep without blood on your hands. You've heard it now. Not just a story. Not just a testimony. The summons. This isn't just my story, it's yours. I walked through the door between life and death. And when I came back carrying a flame. Not to decorate, but to ignite. I was shown the face of the church. I was shown what's coming. I was told to speak because a trumpet is sounding, and not everyone will survive the silence. There is no more time for comfort. No more time for neutral ground. No more pretending that darkness is light and light is optional. The shaking has already begun, and what you build your life on must be him, because all other ground will burn. When the veil lifts, you must choose. Will you rise, or will you remain asleep? Will you carry what you've heard into the fire, or will you bury it beneath distraction and doubt? This is your invitation, not from me, but from the one who called my name in the dark, and now perhaps is calling yours. Return to the fire. Return to the altar. Return to the one who was always waiting behind your silence. You were brought here to remember. Remember who you are. Remember whose breath is in your lungs. Remember what the cross cost. Remember what still waits beyond this life for the pure in heart. The time is now. Choose. You do not have the luxury of delay. Not anymore. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to listen. Listen to what stirs in your bones. Listen to what awakens when truth enters the room. Because that's not emotion. That's your spirit recognizing its origin. This story was not told to impress you. It was told to awaken you. To burn away what is dead and leave only what is eternal. He called my name in the dark, and I said yes. And now he's calling yours. There is no going back. Only forward. Only fire. Only surrender. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. Return to the fire. And when you do, you will never be the same again. If this story found your soul, if something inside you trembled, don't let it go cold. Like, comment, subscribe. Not for algorithm, but for awakening. Share this with the ones you love, even if they don't yet understand. Because this message will find those it was meant for. This is NDE Tales HQ, but it is more than a channel. It is a door, a call, a trumpet in the night. And if you've heard it, then you were born for this hour. Return to the fire, while there's still time.